and welcome to Booklust. My guest today via Zoom is Charles Finch, author of What Just Happened: Notes on a Long Year. Charles, thank you so much for joining me today. I've loved your book. I don't know if you could see like all the little things. I gave up putting them in, partly because I ran out, but partly because there would be on every page, there was something that I found so interesting and so much that I wanted to talk to you about. I don't read a lot of reviews of the books that I'm going to interview the authors because I don't want to be. Your reviews aside of the books, it's hard for me to trust reviews because everybody reads a book so differently from everyone else. But the reviews that I saw of your book always begin with, I didn't think I'd like to revisit 2020, which is what this book is. And I have to say, I felt exactly the same way. I didn't want to revisit it, but you're such a remarkable writer, and it's not just revisiting day by day of that, but I feel like the reader gets to know you, and you're such a Renaissance man, that I just loved this book. So here's my first question. I'll finally let you talk. Do you keep a journal, or? Yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for those kind words. As you say, like a lot of people, I think, are hesitant to read a book that's about 2020, and I feel insecure about that because I understand it completely. I feel like it's so close, the pandemic and Black Lives Matter and the election. So just thank you so much for saying that. I'm not a journal keeper. I never have been, and since I finished the book, I wasn't, which makes it felt very unusual. The book is structured as a journal that starts in March of 2020. I was thinking of the great Walter Benjamin thing of start the story at the last possible second. So I thought about starting it in January when we first heard about COVID or something like that. But then I ended up starting it in March, and it goes through January of 2021, January 6th and everything. And since then, I haven't had a single day where I was like, I need to write anything down. But, that year was so unusual. And so it felt so strange day to day. It's very rare that life feels different. You know what I mean? Like everyone has individuated struggles and differences, but it's rare that the whole world suddenly feels different. And I think a lot of writers took out their notebooks in those early March days, and I was one of them. I actually didn't keep it as a straightforward journal. That's partly an artifice that I wanted to create, because as you say, a lot of it is personal stories and long digressions and stuff like that. But no, I've never been a journaler. I think, I don't know, do you write a journal?
I don't.
I've always been inclined more to express like how I'm feeling on a given day by writing fiction or a poem or something like that, and that it's gone back to being like that. But I think just that year, I don't know what happened. I know the book's called What Just Happened, so I should have an answer. But
do you keep a note? One of the things that I loved about the book were all the quotes. And those are many of the things that have these pink slips are the different quotes. And so do you have a day book? I mean, do you have like a day book where you notebook filled with quotes?
It's a great question. What I do is I write in books a lot. It made my heart feel very warm to see your Post-it notes, because I am a Post-iter and a dog earer and everything like that. And I get yelled at by people because they see me writing and beating up books, but that's just how I am. And so what I do is I tend to remember the quotes I really like they just stick with me,
Right.
Which I think happens to a lot of people who read a lot. But I also, when I started writing more criticism in the mid 2010s, I would put them in a document of what you call exactly a day book. And so most of the quotes in the book, I think, are things that have just shaped what I think like. Like we were talking yesterday on Twitter about the Kafka quote about
Right.
a novel being 4 monstrous years of ups and downs, and you know yourself as a novelist,
Right.
of decisions and terrible calculations. So things like that just sort of lodge in my brain. But I do keep, the answer is yes, I try to transcribe what I've dog-eared and stuff like that, but I'm erratic about it. And the quotes that tend to survive as long as as many drafts into the work as to make the final product tend to be the ones that I couldn't forget if I wanted to. You
Uh-huh.
know that feeling?
Yeah. Yeah. Like one of mine is people say that life is the thing, but I prefer reading. Logan Pearsall Smith, which I actually, back in the day, I needle pointed it, you know, to put it on a pillow, which has since disappeared. Um,
Oh,
I, so I thought that I thought the strength of your book was that it did illuminate 2020, and it was this crazy year, but it made you seem like this person who's trying his best to live a normal life throughout it, and and I think that that you bring that to life so well. I don't know, Charles. I felt like I knew you so well, and that I just wanted to talk to you about, you know, country music. And I started playing all these Iris Dement, you know, while I was
oh yeah, I love
reading.
her. I
Yeah,
really
right.
have you seen that live concert of hers on YouTube where she's with all the other musicians?
No.
It's so
Uh-uh.
good. If you look up Our Town, which is one of my favorite
Oh,
songs, she
me
has
too.
a
Yeah.
live version of that that's just incredible, with a ton of, I think Rosemary Harris. I mean, what's her name? Yeah, not Rosemary Harris. Isn't that the author?
That's the act. Yeah. Who knows?
Be that as it may, it's really worth looking up for. Yeah, no, I think that's what I wanted the book to be. And I think that it was an interesting book to write because I felt so alone, you know, like 2020, I think we all did. And so during that time, I was trying to think like, what would a reader want to know about someone going through 2020? Like if I was trying to, I usually, when I write, don't think about the reader much. Like I think about what I would want, but
Hmm.
for some reason I kept thinking like, if I were having a really great conversation with Nancy or with someone, you know, like a friend, what would I tell them about this year? And that was kind of the driving feeling behind the book, which made it, I it was the hardest book I've ever written because I cared so much about getting that right. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
felt very important to me, and I'm not even sure why, but it felt really important to me to write down, you know, my own inner experiences and to be. I guess I've always found friendship in books. I mean, you just mentioned it with the quote you needle pointed, but at the worst times of my life, books have been there for me from, you
Right.
know, a very
Right.
early age on. And I wanted it to be that kind of book in a way because it was a hard time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think
I
that
hope that
one of
doesn't make it
the
sound depressing. It's not a depressing book, I hope.
no, right. I mean, it's not a depressing book except the circumstances are depressing. But one of the, you know, when I started it, and there's early on your friend Nathan, who's a physician in New York, really into the whole COVID thing and dealing with patients on ventilators and all of that. I mean, there's some line about 15,000 deaths in Italy, or, you know, all of that. And then to think from that March to this March, it's been a long march. You know?
Yeah, it's been a long March 2020. We're still
Right.
there in a lot of ways.
Exactly.
And a long
Exactly.
March lowercase. You know, it's interesting because Nathan and I, we would text all day and as we always do, or Slack or whatever, email. And just you could tell that something was happening before the numbers. But I remember, you know, talking with my friends and we were saying, will it be 50,000 people who die from COVID? Will it be
Right.
60,000? And it was considered pretty outre to say 75,000
Right.
people would
Right.
die or something like that. And of course we passed 900,000, and the dimensions of the tragedy, I think, are something I think we'll be thinking about that year for a long time, I
Mm-hmm.
guess.
Mm-hmm.
Because I mean, it feels so disorienting that we started out with such we thought we might be inside for a few weeks. I don't know if many
Right.
people remember that even. We thought maybe 2 weeks off, and people were like, oh, I'll get a little time off of work. I'll work
Right.
from home. And here we are. As you say, it's been a long March.
Yeah, yeah. What what were you reading then?
It's a great question. I mentioned in the book that I was reading, well, I should say, first of all, that I always am reading some kind of comforting
Yeah.
book. I write in my sort of regular writing life. I write British detective novels, and which is very far from humorous / serious pandemic memoirs. So the reason I write those in part is because I found such a home in them when I was a teenager. So I wrote the first one before I'd even been to England, and it was based on reading Elizabeth Gaskell and Wilkie Collins and a lot of P.G. Wodehouse, just mainlining it. And so in March 2020, I remember people were reading Anna Karenina. There was like a lot of like, well, we're at home, let's read a long book. Or
Right.
I've sort of spent my whole professional life doing that, as you have, right? And so I went back to my nursery food, kind of like I went back to
Yeah.
reading Blandings, the P.G. Wodehouse Blandings books, and Laurie Colwin, and
Yep.
writers like that who mean something sort of to my heart. Do you know what I mean? And then
Yes.
as the pandemic went on, I found myself, as I write in the book, reading some stranger writers like Murakami, writers for whom the world is a little bit impenetrable, maybe, or
Mhm.
for whom it's mysterious. But I never did the big, long Anna Karenina or anything like
Right.
that. What about you? Can I ask? I know this
Yeah,
is your.
sure. I didn't either. I found that I did exactly what you did. I went back to sort of tried and true. For me, it was Georgette Heyer. The five of hers that I just absolutely love. Terry Pratchett's disc, the Discworld ones, but the specific ones about the Watch and Sam Vimes and all of those, which I just found myself reading and rereading those. But which is your favorite Laurie Colwin book? Do you have a clear favorite?
I do, and I feel disloyal to the other ones because I feel like they all have such great merits. And I think her short fiction is actually pretty underrated. She was like
Oh,
in the New
yeah.
Yorker, but to me, Happy All the Time is just
Uh-huh.
an indelible. I think I read it when I was 13 or 14, and its portrait of New York City and of the inner lives of adults felt so real, and so it was kind of. I mean, it felt like being a contemporary of Jane Austen or something. You know what
Uh-huh.
I mean? Like where it's so light but so deft that you feel kind of like attacked and embraced at the same time. It's so brilliant.
Yeah, I think my favorite still is the very first one, Shine On Bright and Dangerous Object. I mean, that I think that book in some ways, not plot wise, but I think the kind of the feeling or that really influenced when I wrote my novel George and Lizzie. That was part of the feeling behind it.
Now that you say that, and it has that great first book virtue of being, a lot of first books are imperfect, but they're always the person, and that
Right.
book, you can tell it's that part. But I mean, there are a lot of people who are probably shouting at the screen right now because we're not saying home cooking,
Right.
like
Yeah. Right.
that's number one with a bullet, and the rest are, so.
Although I did once try to make years ago the fried chicken recipe from home cooking, and it was just a total disaster. So I have to say I'm not a cook, but I did try.
I've read that book many times and I've never cooked from it once because I'm not a cook either. My favorite thing in that book is find a little olive oil. You can usually find a 1 ounce jar at a specialty store. And it has all kinds of 80s advice like that. It's so
Right.
charming.
Right. I just remember how sad I was when she died so young.
Such a tragedy. But her daughter is doing a good job, I think, of keeping her legacy alive. They
Yes.
just re-released all her books
Yep.
in new editions.
Yeah.
So
And I was
I hope
afraid.
people read her.
Because Shine On Bright and Dangerous Object wasn't published by Vintage, so they had trouble, I think, getting permission, or at first they weren't going to do that. Because I wrote a blurb for those. They asked me to write a blurb.
Well, it does
because I
share a
loved
lot
her so much.
with your book, honestly, which is high praise coming from me.
Oh, well, thank you. So let's talk about your fondness. Oh, gosh. Okay, let's start. So Murakami. So The Wild Sheep Chase is my favorite, and my quote that I always remember from there is when he's interviewing the professor and the professor says something about like, now I am sheepless, because, and I just thought that
Oh,
was
that's so
beautiful.
great.
Yeah.
I've gone back and forth with them. I think when I was in my, early 20s, I read a bunch of them and I found them so intoxicating. And then I got a little bit, your taste as you read more and more maybe gets more rarefied. And I was like, I want more. But then in the pandemic, I went back and I read Wind Up Bird Chronicle, and I read Wild Sheep Chase, and I read, I love his book about running. Even though I'm not a runner, I
Mm.
think about it once or twice a month that I go on a run, because he has a great line that's like, I'll let myself go as slow as possible, but I just can't stop running. I can't start walking. And I think about that when I'm like writing. I think like I can go as slow as I want. If I just get a sentence out today, I'll do that, but I can't stop running. So his work is so evocative to me of the sort of confusion of being alive. It's like we're all stuck in this thing we don't have all the answers about. And there's a huge amount of beauty and pain sort of traced into every moment of that experience. And to me, he's a writer who captures that. I think reading a book about a world with two moons, or where Tokyo is slightly different, that felt like the pandemic to me. It felt like, what is the world actually? What do I actually know? What are my actual
Right.
first principles here?
Right.
Yeah, it was a wild sheep chase.
Right. And wasn't, and you quote, was it, one of the other things that I like is about the book is that you don't talk down to readers, in a very good way, but you do manage to sort of remind us, like what's it, Barclay, isn't it Berkeley or
Oh
Barclay?
yeah, yeah.
You know,
Bishop Barclay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Bishop Barclay, who said, when you leave a room, you don't know if the chair is still there. I mean, I love that you did that, I think, in a parentheses, and so,
That might be a leftover from writing a lot of criticism, because in a review you want to never, as you say, talk down to any reader, because I go into a review assuming every reader is a better reader than I am, in a way, like, which I think is because, as you say, everyone who reads a book is reading a different book in a way. It's like Winnicott says about a family of five has five mothers in it, you know what I mean? Or because
right,
so everyone's reading the book in their own way. And so if I ever made a reference like that in a review, I never wanted it to seem like I was feeling snobbish about it, or like I was trying to. And I think that lingered into the style of this book, where I wanted to talk about Claude Levi-Strauss, and I wanted to talk about these writers who mean so much to me, but I didn't want to be like, well, they mean so much to me because I'm fancy. I wanted to
right,
say they
right.
meant a lot to my spirit, or to my, this or that. So yeah, I always think about, Samuel Johnson's refutation of George Barclay, Bishop Barclay, was he kicked a chair and said, I dispute it thusly, or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right. Yeah. Do you enjoy writing? I mean, you won the award from the National Book Critics Circle for criticism, the Nona Balakian Award, which was so well deserved.
That's very kind.
Well, it was. But do you enjoy what do you enjoy doing most of the many different kinds of writing that you do? I mean, the Charles Lenox mysteries, which are so evocative of that period. Well, let me. Why did you name him Charles Lenox?
It's so embarrassing. My name is Charles, obviously, and I was originally going to publish the first one. I published the first one when I was 25, and I had a lot of ideas about careers and stuff like that. And I was like, I'm going to do this under a pseudonym. It's a mystery series, and everyone needs a good pseudonym. Like, all my favorite
Right.
writers have them. And then about 2 months before it came out, my mother called me and said, I think she was crying, or she was close to tears. And she said, can you please write it under your own name? Because I want to show my friends and I want to be able to go into the bookstore and stuff like that. And so I had named him Charles Lenox as like a little wink to everyone I knew. Like, I'm going to put a Charles in there, and then my name will
Right.
be whatever it is, like Bruce Metcalf. I'm just making it up, but something. And so I ended up with this thing, and now I get that question, and I'm like, I promise I didn't do it because I'm a narcissist. I mean, I am a narcissist, but that's not the proof of it. So that's the origin story. And then Lennox just was one of those names
Yeah.
that just came to me.
Yeah.
That was the. And you asked what I like about writing. I mean, so I write mysteries, criticism, and nonfiction. It's a great question, because a lot of writing is kind of hateful. I mean, maybe you don't have that experience, but like a lot of it is doubting yourself and feeling awful. But there are times where you get into like a flow state or where you forget your writing.
Mhm.
Hemingway said there are days you write better than you know how to write. And those are the moments that I really treasure and that I can live on for a long time.
Mhm.
And you know, I've never published a poem, but for me, that's the most fun kind of writing, and I still write a lot of those. And they're a way for me to sort of slip into my own mind without raising up a lot of self-aware defenses.
Mhm.
So there are parts of writing I love, and then, but you know, I always think I'm doing too many quotes, but I always think of Wallace Stegner saying, "Hard writing makes easy reading, and easy writing makes hard reading." Like if you just dash off the writing, it doesn't tend to be as good. So I work really hard at it, but that those moments make it all worth it, I think.
Mhm. And do you write at home? I mean, do you have an office at home?
I used to be really particular about that. I do have an office at home. Now I try to be able to write anywhere. You know, I liked, it was really nice when the coffee shops reopened in about, I guess, June of 2020. That felt like it was really freeing because I was already doing everything at home, worrying and hanging out and watching TV and looking at the internet. And so I was writing, but it was a little bit like taking an ice plunge in the morning. I was like, oh, I guess I'll go to the same couch where I sit all night and write, you know, like,
Yeah.
and so when the coffee shops reopened, I would sit there in my mask with my little coffee and whatever, as far from people as possible. And I just felt like had been given the license of the city or something.
You're a big country music fan, and as I am actually. I mean, I felt like yeah. I mean, it's just like the stories they tell, and I mean that's what we were talking about here before we came on. But when you're writing, like when I'm writing, I can't have any sound. It has to be like quiet. So I can't write at coffee shops or you know, no, I can't. But you and I also are both walkers. And do you listen when you walk? Listen to anything?
I tend to listen to a lot of music when I walk and when I write. I can't listen to music with like sharp edges when I write, but I
Right.
can I love listening to like a Bill Evans or Casey Musgraves, or I can't listen to Nirvana when I'm
Right.
when I'm writing. And it's the same when I'm walking. I like to get into a state of I don't know. I think of it as like being like highway hypnosis, kind of, you know, where you forget you were driving. Um, I've actually read somewhere, I read a neurologist's book, and I think he said that your brain, when it's in that state, is actually more active. It's just not like active in the ways we're used to. And walking for me, I wonder if a lot of people like us started walking or walked more during the pandemic. To me, I just felt like it was what my body wanted to do. It was like, you want to swing your arms, you want to have your core moving in a forward
Right.
direction. And it felt like a reconnection with, you know, with what my body felt like doing. It was a huge comfort.
Yeah, for me it was as well. And I also found that when I was walking, if I was having a problem in writing, you know, some sort of knot that I couldn't untie, even though I wasn't thinking about it directly when I was walking, by the time I got home, I had kind of solved it in a way.
Every time. And I never learned I mean, there's a great Latin phrase, solvitur ambulando, solve it by walking. And I never learn it because I'll sit at my desk for 8 hours, like tearing my hair out, and finally I'll give up. And then after a 45-minute walk, I'll come home and it'll look so easy. So I guess I need to start walking sooner.
But yeah, but you walk at night, which I think is really,
I
yeah.
love walking at night. Although these last few nights, it's coyote mating season here in Los Angeles, and so in our little kind of little green streets, you see these coyotes wandering around looking for mates. So I've been doing a little more daytime walking while that's going
Uh-huh.
on.
I remember the first time I saw a coyote walking early in the morning in Seattle, and I thought it was a wolf. I mean, he had like a squirrel in his mouth, and he was across the street, and I thought it was like a wolf. It was.
I'm an East Coaster. I was not prepared for all of these coyotes.
Me either. Me either. Gosh, it was crazy. So tell me what you're reading there's a new Charles Lenox that came out recently, 2021, I think, right? Or
That's right.
yeah.
So I had, that came out in paperback just a couple of weeks ago, An Extravagant Death. And I'm proud of it because I wrote that during the pandemic as well. And it was difficult, but it's set in Newport, and I was wondering if there was new stuff to stay. I'm a big Edith Wharton fan, as I imagine you might be. I don't know.
Yeah.
And so when I chose that setting, which was the first time my detective Lennox has been to America, I was like, oh, am I just going to do a pet? But I really started to get so fascinated by these cottages, these huge 80 bedroom cottages owned by the Vanderbilts and Astors. And so, yeah, that just came out. And then I had to write, or not had to, but I had this idea, and I signed a contract to write this book. And so now I'm just lying fallow. And what I do is I just read all day I'm going to spend 6 months or so, or a year, maybe even, just reading all day. And so right now I'm trying to think what I'm reading. I'm reading a wonderful book from the early 80s called Fin de siècle Vienna, which is about it's by Karl Schorsky. It's about Klimt and, all these amazing people who were around back then. One of the things I learned is that Jewish people weren't allowed to do humanities, and that accounts for the huge preponderance of Nobel winners in the sciences. Wow. Yeah, they weren't permitted into those departments. And Freud is another example. Like, he might have in a different time gone into history or whatever, but he had to be a psychiatrist. So I'm reading that. I'm reading Middlesex again by Jeffrey Eugenides, a book I love. I don't know why I'm reading about, is it bad to be, I'm a little bit of a bigamist when it comes to the books. I read 6 or 7 at once. I'm reading a ton of French for the second time just because I'm a big fan. What are you reading? Now that I have a National Book Award winner on the other line, I want to know.
I just finished a book called The Christie Affair.
I have that. How was it?
It's very good. It's so clever.
I'm a big Agatha Christie fan, so my bar is high.
Oh, no, I think you will really like this. But we could talk about it on Twitter, since you're a big Twitter person, and that's my thing of choice, actually, is Twitter.
I like it. It's like a cocktail party, right?
It is. But you could just really choose who you want to engage with.
Yeah, unlike a cocktail party.
Yeah, unlike a cocktail party. A cocktail party, what is that? God,
I know.
Heard tell of that. Charles, I just really want to thank you so much for all that you do. Your reviews, the mysteries, the Charles Lenox. I mean, I'm just amazed at all that you do so well. And thank you for writing What Just Happened.
That's so kind. I feel like I'm doing a bad job at all of it, so it's nice for you to thank me.
Hey, listen, you could email me anytime, and I will just tell you what a wonderful,
don't underestimate my insecurity. I'm a writer, so.
Great. I'm happy to do it, quite honestly. Okay, good luck with your reading and your writing, and I hope we can do this again sometime, maybe in person next time you come to.
Yeah, next time I'm there. I would love that. Thank you so much, Nancy. It's really an honor.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.